Chapter 14. Locke's Political Philosophy. A. The Hereditary Principle. In the years 1689 and 1690, just after the Revolution of 1688, Locke wrote his two treatises on government, of which the second especially is very important in the history of political ideas. The first of these two treatises is a criticism of the doctrine of hereditary power. It is a reply to Sir Robert Filmer's Patriarcha, or the Natural Power of Kings, which was published in 1680, but written under Charles I. Sir Robert Filmer, who was a devout upholder of the divine right of kings, had the misfortune to live till 1653, and must have suffered acutely from the execution of Charles I and the victory of Cromwell. But Patriarcha was written before these sad events, though not before the Civil War, so that it naturally shows awareness of the existence of subversive doctrines. Such doctrines, as Filmer points out, were not new in 1640. In fact, both Protestant and Catholic divines, in their contest with Catholic and Protestant monarchs respectively, had vigorously affirmed the right of subjects to resist tyrannical princes, and their writings supplied Sir Robert with abundant material for controversy. Sir Robert Filmer was knighted by Charles I, and his house is said to have been plundered by the parliamentarians 10 times. He thinks it not unlikely that Noah sailed up the Mediterranean and allotted Africa, Asia, and Europe to Ham, Shem, and Japheth respectively. He held that, by the English constitution, the Lords only give counsel to the king, and the Commons have even less power. The king, he says, alone makes the laws, which proceed solely from his will. The king, according to Filmer, is perfectly free from all human control, and cannot be bound by the acts of his predecessors, or even by his own, for impossible it is in nature that a man should give a law unto himself. Filmer, as these opinions show, belonged to the most extreme section of the divine right party. Patriarcha begins by combating the common opinion that mankind is naturally endowed and born with freedom from all subjection, and at liberty to choose what form of government it please, and the power which any one man hath over others was at first bestowed according to the discretion of the multitude. This tenet, he says, was first hatched in the schools. The truth, according to him, is quite different. It is that originally God bestowed the kingly power upon Adam, from whom it descended to his heirs, and ultimately reached the various monarchs of modern times. Kings now, he assures us, either are, or are to be reputed, the next heirs to those first progenitors who were at first the natural parents of the whole people. Our first parent, it seems, did not adequately appreciate his privilege as universal monarch, for the desire of liberty was the first cause of the fall of Adam. The desire of liberty is a sentiment which Sir Robert Filmer regards as impious. The claims made by Charles I, and by his protagonists on his behalf, were in excess of what earlier times would have conceded to kings. Filmer points out that Parsons, the English Jesuit, and Buchanan, the Scotch Calvinist, who agree in almost nothing else, both maintain that sovereigns can be deposed by the people for misgovernment. Parsons, of course, was thinking of the Protestant Queen Elizabeth, and Buchanan of the Catholic Mary Queen of Scots. The doctrine of Buchanan was sanctioned by success, but that of Parsons was disproved by his colleague Campion's execution. Even before the Reformation, theologians tended to believe in setting limits to kingly power. This was part of the battle between the Church and the State, which raged throughout Europe during most of the Middle Ages. In this battle, the State depended upon armed force, the Church upon cleverness and sanctity. As long as the Church had both these merits, it won. When it came to have cleverness only, it lost. But the things which eminent and holy men had said against the power of kings remained on record. Though intended in the interests of the Pope, they could be used to support the rights of the people to self-government. The subtle schoolmen, says Filmer, to be sure to thrust down the king below the Pope, thought it the safest course to advance the people above the king, so that the papal power might take the place of the regal. He quotes the theologian Bellarmine as saying that secular power is bestowed by men, that is, not by God, and is in the people unless they bestow it on a prince. Thus, Bellarmine, according to Filmer, makes God the immediate author of a democratical estate, which sounds to him as shocking as it would to a modern plutocrat to say that God is the immediate author of Bolshevism. Filmer derives political power not from any contract, nor yet from any consideration of the public good, but entirely from the authority of a father over his children. His view is that the source of regal authority is subjection of children to parents, that the patriarchs in Genesis were monarchs, that kings are the heirs of Adam, or at least are to be regarded as such, that the natural rights of a king are the same as those of a father, and that by nature sons are never free of paternal power, even when the son is adult and the parent is in his dotage. This whole theory seems to a modern mind so fantastic that it is hard to believe it was seriously maintained. We are not accustomed to deriving political rights from the story of Adam and Eve. We hold it obvious that parental power should cease completely when the son or daughter reaches the age of 21, and that before that it should be very strictly limited, both by the state and by the right of independent initiative which the young have gradually acquired. We recognize that the mother has rights at least equal to those of the father. But apart from all these considerations, it would not occur to any modern man outside Japan to suppose that political power should be in any way assimilated to that of parents over children. In Japan, it is true, a theory closely similar to Filmer's is still held, and must be taught by all professors and schoolteachers. The Mikado can trace his descent from the sun goddess, whose heir he is. Other Japanese are also descended from her, but belong to cadet branches of her family. Therefore, the Mikado is divine, and all resistance to him is impious. This theory was, in the main, invented in 1868, but is now alleged in Japan to have been handed down by tradition ever since the creation of the world. The attempt to impose a similar theory upon Europe, of which attempt Filmer's Patriarcha is part, was a failure. Why? The acceptance of such a theory is in no way repugnant to human nature. For example, it was held, apart from Japan, by the ancient Egyptians and by the Mexicans and Peruvians before the Spanish conquest. At a certain stage of human development, it is natural. Stuart England had passed this stage, but modern Japan has not. The defeat of theories of divine right in England was due to two main causes. One was the multiplicity of religions. The other was the conflict for power between the monarchy, the aristocracy, and the higher bourgeoisie. As for religion, the king, since the reign of Henry VIII, was the head of the Church of England, which was opposed both to Rome and to most of the Protestant sects. The Church of England boasted of being a compromise. The preface to the authorized version begins, "It hath been the wisdom of the Church of England, ever since the first compiling of her public liturgy, to keep the mean between two extremes." On the whole, this compromise suited most people. Queen Mary and King James II tried to drag the country over to Rome, and the victors in the Civil War tried to drag it over to Geneva. But these attempts failed, and after 1688 the power of the Church of England was unchallenged. Nevertheless, its opponents survived. The nonconformists especially were vigorous men, and were numerous among the rich merchants and bankers whose power was continually increasing. The theological position of the king was somewhat peculiar, for he was not only the head of the Church of England, but also of the Church of Scotland. In England he had to believe in bishops and reject Calvinism. In Scotland he had to reject bishops and believe in Calvinism. The Stuarts had genuine religious convictions, which made this ambiguous attitude impossible for them, and caused them even more trouble in Scotland than in England. But after 1688, political convenience led kings to acquiesce in professing two religions at once. This militated against zeal, and made it difficult to regard them as divine persons. In any case, neither Catholics nor nonconformists could acquiesce in any religious claims on behalf of the monarchy. The three parties of king, aristocracy, and rich middle class made different combinations at different times. Under Edward IV and Louis XI, king and middle class combined against the aristocracy. Under Louis XIV, king and aristocracy combined against the middle class. In England in 1688, aristocracy and middle class combined against the king. When the king had one of the other parties on his side, he was strong. When they combined against him, he was weak. For these reasons, among others, Locke had no difficulty in demolishing Filmer's arguments. So far as reasoning is concerned, Locke has, of course, an easy task. He points out that if parental power is what is concerned, the mother's power should be equal to the father's. He lays stress on the injustice of primogeniture, which is unavoidable if inheritance is to be the basis of monarchy.